So everyone's been using ROAS and blended ROAS, particularly if you don't have advanced multi-touch attribution tools. But let's start to look at profit on ad spend.
What is your marketing philosophy?
Operating with clear metrics, things like LTV to CAC ratios and contribution margin focus, but always in service of like the brand equity and long-term value.
Are there any best practices in the marketing world that you disagree with?
Marketers will say, let the algorithm handle it. The algorithm doesn't know your business. We're creating customer segmentation that's layering on third-party data and building a model and understanding the most profitable customers. And so we can beat the ROAS on those campaigns by 30% with our targeted segments versus what the algorithm is doing.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Andres Figueira and I'm going to be your host for the day. This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Company, helping fast-growing teams hire exceptional remote talent from Argentina, South Africa, and beyond. We connect companies with world-class professionals who bring skill, reliability, and a global perspective to every role. And just for our listeners, we're offering an exclusive 10% discount on your first hire. All you need to do is visit globaltalent.co, click Start Hiring, and mention the podcast listener discount when we reach out. And today, with me here, I am speaking with Rita Zahir, Vice President of Marketing and E-commerce at Unique Vintage, a female-owned and operated vintage-inspired e-commerce, retail, and wholesale company. So with that said, Rita, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. It's so good to connect with you.
Yes, we are very excited about being able to make this work and to hear all about your experience and what you've lived as Vice President of Marketing. And Rita, just so that we can hit the ground running and get the audience a bit more in context, would you be able to tell us further about your background and how you came to be VP of Marketing?
Sure, yeah. Well, I've been working in e-com for honestly 20 years after I went to grad school at USC, and I just dove in and started with like some really amazing shoe companies. I worked for shoes.com. I ran online marketing for famous footwear, a lot of branded sites, and have really had a very nonlinear career across a ton of different types of kind of industries, from shoes to luxury fashion and software, mobile apps, and as well, I worked at Polaris for a while, so I ran marketing for Trans-American Auto Parts, all of that business. So very, very nonlinear. But I have been working more in the kind of either early stage startup or turnaround space, helping companies become more profitable as they seek for, total revenue growth, but to have that be profitable and scalable.
Okay. And about how long ago did you start as VP of Marketing at Unique Vintage?
So I've been here for about 2 years, and I also run, marketing for some startup brands still at the same time, some in the luxury accessory space.
Okay, so you're actually like working this role of vice president and also serving as a consultant for some other smaller
Yeah,
brands.
still helping some of those early stage, because that you can't get away from that. Like you love those guys in that early stage founder kind of place.
And Rita, in terms of your learnings from working as vice president of Unique Vintage and also with these smaller companies, what is your marketing philosophy?
I really think that marketing is one of the very few hands-on sports that still exist in the business space, particularly when it comes to e-commerce, because it's such a fast-paced, changing environment that people who kind of say like set it and forget it is sort of gone in our space. But I also think within that it's really important to build structure. So that's my philosophy, is like operating with clear metrics, things like LTV to CAC ratios and contribution margin focus, but always in service of like the brand equity and long-term value.
Okay. Okay.
Just like making sure you have the structure so that you can enable both your team and yourself to run fast and be aggressive in the space and be learning and testing and all of that.
Of course. Now, and being able to have that structure also provides you with the possibility of understanding very well the data that you're presented with and knowing what works and what you got to reiterate with and what you need to leave alone because it just did not perform well. And that way you also have a better insight as to how to act and where to actually, what's it called, invest your energy.
Yeah. I think prioritizing your energy is very important in today's market.
Of course. And in terms of marketing practices that you've seen, Rita, do you have any marketing practices that you like to apply that you see are commonly used?
A lot of people are just getting into the early stages of truly understanding more precise metrics and KPIs, and making that shift from very general um, things like gross margin down to getting back to like specific contribution margin. But that shift is something that I think I'm seeing a lot more of. And obviously, the more advanced AI tools are helping companies get there a lot
Of
faster,
course.
right? Without having a BI team, without having a dedicated analyst, working with tools that help you have actionable insights and just like move fast, things that you used to have a whole department to do before, I think is a lot easier to do now. And you're seeing it grow a lot more.
AI optimization and efficiency is something that we can't deny. It's a crazy trend. Like it's been a while now since AI has been within us and among us, but I'm just flabbergasted
A
at
lot longer
how
than we think, right? I
yeah,
mean,
and like
since before we were calling it AI in marketing, right? It was called machine learning and it was called iterative learning or things like that
Mhm.
back in the day. Like,
Oh my goodness.
uh,
Now and like nowadays it's an update every single week, every single day.
yeah,
It's this
yeah.
new platform where you can do it or this new software that they launched and it's crazy and it's hard to keep up, but it really is such an exciting moment to be what's it called? Like tinkering with these tools and making sure that you're trying to understand the best way to apply them because it just gets very entertaining at one point. I've spent been just using AI for like 3 hours after my work, my work hours are done, and I'm just like playing with it.
And I think that's the best mentality they have because a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed or anxious about AI, but like just start somewhere. And there's so many little places, so many of your current partners that are already evolving AI tools within their tools that you're using. I think that's the best place to start. And for me, that was definitely critical to getting more involved in rolling out more advanced AI tools.
So you mentioned a common practice that you really like or that you see as being applied, but then are there any common practices or best practices in the marketing world that you disagree with?
Here's my biggest pet peeve, and you hear it a lot, but marketers will say, "Let the algorithm handle it," and the all your vendors will say that, right? Meta will continuously say, "Hey, just like trust the algorithm, let the algorithm," and there are places where you can like start there, right? But I think uh, giving up complete control of one your data and insights and like building customer segmentation and testing that against the algorithm. But two is the algorithm doesn't know your business and you need to make it your business to know your business, right? So my really biggest example of this is dynamic product ads, which now you're seeing everywhere. We've been running them in not just Meta, right, and kind of like Google Shopping forever, but Pinterest. We've seen some really great results with dynamic product ads and Reddit and these kinds of places. Well, the algorithm likes to have the entire feed and it says like let the click rates and like let people sort of like let the algorithm figure it out, but the algorithm doesn't understand your contribution margins, your inventory forecasts, how quickly that inventory is turning over, and if something was getting a lot of clicks and it sold out, it's still showing those items, or the margin is way bigger on these or that. The return rate, right? The algorithm has no idea about products that are getting returned and thus costing you money to sell. And so I think you gotta do two things here. You gotta really understand your data and optimize it and create a data feed that's going into these algorithms, right? That's optimized towards your main KPI. You want to understand contribution margin at the product level and you want to optimize. But you also want to own that data. So the other place where you're seeing that is the beast of Andromeda, right? On Meta, where they're just like, feed it as much creative as you can, and the algorithm will figure out your customer segments. Right, but it might not figure out your prioritization of your customer segments, your most valuable customers, your highest LTV, your highest margin customers long term. But you need to know that. And so I've been testing through one of our partners this testing it against like Advantage Plus or something where we're creating customer segmentation that's layering on third-party data and building a model and understanding the most profitable customers. And we're seeing, particularly in times of tumult, of like holiday or changing of the season, beginning of the quarter, we saw a lot of change. The algorithm hasn't figured it out yet. And so we can beat the ROAS on those campaigns by 30% with our targeted segments versus what the algorithm is doing. So not to be too technical, but just to say, yes, it's a good place to start creating creative and doing that. But like, think about long term how you're going to own your data and how you're going to own your customer versus all the platforms making those decisions.
No, I understand. How long did it take you, Rita, to like create this workaround to that flaw that you noticed in the platform's algorithm and how it actually does everything?
So I've been working with two different partners. I'll start with the first one, Genius AI, for years, a few years before even the algorithm changed this way that it has, before Meta launched Andromeda, to say you should know your customer segments. You should layer on the data that you have, but also as much third-party data, this like idea of behavioral modeling that sounds very complex, but like you should understand who you can target that's the most valuable, but also what experiences you can give them, right? And so that we've been doing for years, but as things like the platforms being more aggressive with wanting you to just give them everything and the algorithm makes the decision, has progressed. In some places that works, so you're testing that. In some places, owning this. But more recently, in the last year, I've been working with a partner that's helped us kind of integrate all of the things in one place to understand conversion rate, inventory, return rate, margin, contribution margin per view, right? And and that was the first time I've seen that. As a company called Barkai, really truly interesting because they're trying to say, okay, this is how you prioritize your budget. These products will drive this much profit per view or impression. And these you're actually paying people to buy. Long term, you're losing money every time you buy one of these because your the advertising costs, the conversion rate, the return rate, the margin is so low. We got rid of a bunch of products in our feed where the margin at the end of the day was not enough to justify having them in ads ever. So really exciting stuff. But again, I think it's just like start anywhere, start somewhere, and start thinking about what is a more precise KPI I can move towards. I'm always saying like, okay, yes, everyone's been using ROAS and blended ROAS, MER, right? And that's great, particularly if you don't have advanced multi-touch attribution tools. But let's start to look at profit on ad spend and how do we get there? And how do we like start to build a structure to understand what's actually driving profit versus just revenue volume?
Of course. No, and I love the fact that you were able to notice like you're paying these people to buy your product.
Yes.
That is a
And
first. I had
sometimes it
not
was
heard that.
bestsellers. We're like, oh, we've been selling this for years. It's a
Wow.
bestseller. We sell so many. Okay, but you also have been advertising it for years and you drive a ton of traffic there. And actually, the conversion rate is lower than a brand new product. And actually, the return rate is X. And like, yeah, to start to think about things with more clarity is wow, it's really cool.
And Rita, did you devise or do you have like proprietary claims over this solution, or is this something that you're doing with the company? Like how does somebody get to use this, for example?
So again, I've mentioned before I'm a geek, but I'm always in the market. I'm walking the expo floor at the conference. I'm like meeting partners, but I'm having conversations with current partners. So Genius AI is out there, someone I've worked with and I recommend a lot, right? Bark AI is the one that's pulling in all the data and making the analysis of contribution margin. I highly recommend them, but there's just a ton of players out there that are trying to build into the next evolution of e-commerce. And I think being an active part of the e-commerce community is super helpful because you're meeting people, you're having conversations, you're going to dinner and saying, well, what's working for you at a different brand? And then like having those conversations with your partners as well. We're a relatively small brand, and I've worked for some early stage startups over the years, right? Um, and those relationships with your vendors who become your partners is so important, right?
Okay.
We we did an early stage like alpha test with Meta where we were one of 5 companies globally that got to be part of their voice AI beta. And it was because like we were in the conversations, we were attending the events with Meta, we were going to their office and saying what's new, what's evolving, like we were culturally like opened to testing and saying, hey, no, we know that some things are going to work and some things are going to fail, and like I think those are the things that help people get to be a part of like early stage.
No, and that really it's as you mentioned it, like it allows you to be a part of the conversation and you're always like in this ecosystem that is moving and you're just there and people understand that you're a part of it. So you'll be invited, you'll be somebody that is considered and whose opinion actually will be heard because if you're at the table with all these people, then it's just crazy. It's amazing.
And you've built a relationship. So, if you work for a bunch of different brands, if things are changing, which they always are in e-commerce, like you know what's working not just in your segment, right? Not just in like apparel, right? Right now I'm pretty heavily focused in apparel and accessories, but I'm keeping my eye out over what's happening in car parts, not just because I used
Okay.
to work there, but because I think there's some interesting evolutions that occur there first, or in beauty. There's a ton of AI stuff that came out in beauty first, right? And so I think that's really important.
Rita, I would also love to hear your take on team building. And since you're the VP of Unique Vintage of like VP of marketing, how have you built out your team and how does that work for you?
Um, So again, I've been I've been in e-com for like 20 years, and I have worked at vastly different organizations, right? Billion-dollar public companies like Symantec and Ziff Davis and Polaris, um, and early stage startups. And I think for me, I'm always like, I'm going to be the coach of the A team. I heard one of my bosses said that a long time ago. And I said, yeah, like I want to be the coach of the A team, meaning like I hire and grow people I believe in and that I'm learning from and that are the best at what they do. And I think even in an early stage, super lean, I've been in that space, right? Under 5 million, um, scaled to 16 million in less than 2 years. Like that's team building from the ground up. That's knowing knowing retention and building it out and then hiring someone, knowing paid media so well that you could build out the structure, you can hire an agency, you could build out relationships and then bringing someone in. And I think depending on the stage of your organization, the leadership needs to have both the knowledge, but also the interest in those areas to be able to build teams like that.
And in terms of remote first style of working or in the workplace and physically, do you have a preference, Rita? Or I'm not sure how they do it at Unique Vintage or from your side, what is what you prefer more?
I've always loved the office because the internet's always been faster, and especially when you work in .coms, there's always like snacks and it's fun and you're interacting. And I think particularly early in my career, I was learning so much being in the office. And I think a lot of people who come out of college and are remote only miss out on that. But these last few years at all these companies that I've been at, it's been sort of this hybrid model, which I now think is definitely a preference, because you do have those days in office where you're brainstorming and maybe there's a whiteboard even involved, super old school, right? And you have the interactions and you're building relationships and you're making it so that people feel comfortable. It's a safe space for people to experiment and bring up ideas and question things, right? But there are those days where you can be super head down, especially if you have a commute, like you just got those 2 hours back, and be focused and get stuff done. So for me, I found the hybrid really, for me, starting to be like, oh, this is great. Like this is a great combination.
And Rita, in terms of the talent that you guys use, or the talent that you have you ever outsourced talent? Have you used and worked with people from Latin America, Europe, South Africa, or anything like that?
I think that's a really interesting thing. We definitely outsource now. Like we're trying to test different places, right? And all of the brands I've worked for in the last few years have been trying to sort of understand what's the next step in where you're getting your talent. How do you, especially for brands that are global, right, and selling into different markets, how do you expand your knowledge base? How do you expand the creativity and kind of the diversity of your team? I think, uh, and if you're a super lean team and you can't afford headcount, um, testing into external resources, whether that's for a project base or a certain time base or whatever it is really good for that kind of evolving early stage startup in particular, as well as like a turnaround company that's like 20 years old.
And Rita, I'd like to ask you one more question before we actually close out the show, and that is, well, what are your goals for this year, for 2026, and what would you like to have accomplished towards the end?
So, I have really focused on this idea of profitable scale and building a structure that supports that. Building the right relationships, finding the right vendors and partners, the right team, to build a growth engine. And so I think also something that's repeatable and and can be used in other places. Is really interesting to me, because I think not a lot of people are super focused on profitable growth, even if sometimes they say that.
I love how you mentioned that you want it to be repeatable and usable in other places, because that is when you really notice and understand that what you created is good to go and that you have a hell of a process. Because if you're able to reiterate, as I mentioned before, based on something that went well and it goes well once more and it repeats in doing that, then I think you've hit the jackpot. So I really hope that you are able to, Rita, and I will keep my eyes peeled and I'll connect with you via LinkedIn just to see how you evolve and keep on growing this year.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like I've been a lot more involved in the community this year, especially on LinkedIn. So that'll be great.
That is amazing. And with that said, just wanted to say thank you, Rita, for hopping on the episode with us, for providing your insights, your story, and just telling us all about what you're doing. We really appreciate your time and being able to do this with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
No problem at all. And to anybody who is here listening to us, we also appreciate you for coming on this podcast with us to learn about the different personalities that we're talking to and all the industries that we are seeing. So with that said, have a good one.